And so the push to the Stanley Cup playoffs is upon us for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Aside from a minor league move, as anticipated, it was a quiet deadline day for Kyle Dubas and company. Lots of activity, of course, leading up to Friday for sure. It's Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill breaking it down and resetting everything. I can't believe, Rosie, 20 games remaining in this Maple Leaf season.
I know that came and went fast, man. It's been a lot of highs, a couple of lows. Thankfully, I think the lows are behind us. But if looking at this roster, this is the final roster. This is what we have to work with, and there's been a lot of movement, so no one can say that we didn't do anything to put the pieces in place to have success. But now it's just looking forward, seeing what we can do come down the stretch.
Yeah, so we were speculating the last couple days leading up to Friday that maybe there was one more move up the sleeve of Kyle Dubas, but I totally understand it. For number one, they have the money to activate Matt Murray from the injury list, and number two, it gives them room and flexibility to sign Matthew Knies when his college season is done. I think in general, you look at the market, all the heavy lifting was done by Friday. It was a really, really uneventful and quiet day, and this is pretty much what I expected from the Maple Leafs, Rosie.
Yeah, like you said, things were done early and things were done in a big way. And I like the way that Cal Dubas didn't screw around, wait till the last minute. He knew what he wanted. He got the deals that he felt made sense, and he went and pulled triggers early. So we were pretty much done before this final deadline day. I mean, that's the risk you run when you run, put your shows together for the last couple hours of it. People might be done pulling triggers, and that was very much the case this year. But when you look at the Maple Leafs moves in their roster and where they're headed and the holes they filled, I think you got to be pretty happy with it. And now it's just yet to see how they can make it come to fruition.
As mentioned, they pulled off a minor deal. Dryden Hunt, who came over from the Dennis Malgin deal with Colorado, dealt to the Calgary Flames to redeem Zahorna, who's pretty much been a waiver wire pickup extraordinaire the last couple of years, bouncing around the league. I doubt it, very doubt it, you're going to see him play a game with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I mentioned it, 6 new players into the fold since February 17th. I'm still jacked about the Ryan O'Reilly pickup. Maybe that's where we start, Rosie, in terms of the conversation of what he can bring to the table here moving forward.
Yeah, Riley, and a Cherry comes with that. Cherry
Yeah.
as well comes with that, and I mean he's showing some depth and showing some grit as well. And Ryan O'Reilly had his big game there, his second or third game in a Maple Leafs uniform, putting up a hat trick. And you look at what we gave up; it was some picks and some prospects, and it'll be funny to see what that becomes. The Leafs have a bad habit of having their picks that they give up become penultimate players in the league. But to get a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, I think he's already made his presence felt on that roster and in that locker room. He's a huge addition. I think you're only going to see that more and more as things come down the wire and getting into playoffs. And all of his experience and Conn Smythe award-winning play is going to come and show itself throughout the playoffs here. And just a guy with you just look at him and talk to him and hear him and everything he says, everything he does, you just want to be a teammate. He's got no tooth. He doesn't wear a visor. He can crash and bang. He scores goals, goes to the dirty spots. He's just a wicked guy, and his resume speaks for itself. So that trade was the first thing that the Leafs did, and I think that was a big splash in itself, and there was more to come behind him.
Yeah, exactly. And they added to that mix. And I wanted to ask too, you got a unique vantage point on Thursday night when you were at the Scotiabank Saddledome for the first game back for Luke Shen. What did you see from the team? What was it like to be up close?
Yeah, I think it was weird dressing like the numbers that they had on the back end, and they have some bodies dressed, and it was quite a while before he even got, 2 shifts under his belt.
Yeah.
And I think he only played, what was it, 12, 13, 14
Under
minutes or
that, it
something
was
like
nine and a
that.
half, I
But
think. Yeah.
I think that was more of a Keefe giving him, some
Chill out.
leeway based on the fact that he hadn't skated with a team in a while. He's been on an airplane. He's been all over the place. And a guy like Luke would want to go and play 18 minutes, but I think they're smart by holding him off. But I just noticed him banging bodies early, and he's putting guys on their back, guys like Milan Lucic. And then I was wondering, like, man, if you start banging bodies and hitting these Calgary Flames and hitting Milan Lucic himself, are you going to have to answer for it? And literally, that's one team where I'm like, if you start running around, there's going to be a guy in your face. And there was nothing. Luke put him on his back twice, other guys down, started scrums, getting in people's faces. And you can see guys back down. And that kind of play, I think is contagious throughout the locker room. I think everyone's going to start playing a little bit bigger, and I just love having that guy. We've been talking about him since October and maybe being a Leafs uniform. I know it was a long shot, but it has actually happened here, and I think it's a huge addition, and that he's a guy with experience winning Stanley Cups, multiple Stanley Cups, and he knows what it takes along with Ryan O'Reilly to get the job done.
I thought the Leafs put on a clinic in that game defensively, like really Calgary Flames to Calgary Flames, which was really, really impressive. And it led to them offensively really breaking loose. And on top of that, I was happy with Joseph Wall's performance in that victory against the Calgary Flames. So you referenced it, like standalone, if there was just the O'Reilly and Achari trade, I'm feeling pretty good. But they added, and I think depth is of vast importance in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So they move forward. Number one right now with 12 forwards. We know who the 13th forward possibly could be. That's Matthew Knies coming out of the University of Minnesota. Potentially could win the Hobey Baker Award. Looking forward to that. Potentially he's got a sign first and foremost. But they have 9 defensemen on the roster. Rosie, as somebody who played in this league, on any given basis, any second, any shift, a guy can get banged up. And I think that depth will be big for them on the back end come game one and come that first round series with Tampa here.
Yeah, I think so. And it gives them some leeway to start pulling guys in and out and injecting guys into the lineup, out of the lineup, playing with different players, different people in and out of the depth chart up and down. So that's something that Keefe likes to do. I think he's going to continue to do that in the next 20 games is really going to be what kind of jam and what kind of gel can we figure out here before the playoffs, because that's where the rubber hits the road. And if you just look at the changes they made, they address things on defense, they address things with their depth on their forwards, especially their bottom 6. They got a top 6 guy who can really get things done. They've addressed everything that we want, and we've got options on the back end now as well. And that's before anyone even talks about that Matthew Knies thing. And I know that some people who aren't really familiar are going to go, well, what the hell are you going to put your eggs in a college player's basket and thinks he's going to make a difference? Normally, I never would. But after interviewing this guy, talking about him, watching him play, and looking at a bunch of his game tape, which is readily available out there, he is a big, strong body who plays the game in a way that I think the Maple Leafs are craving right now. We have all the top 6 and all the finesse and all the glitz and glamour and the skill that you could ask for. And to complement that with a guy who's very high skill, he's going to come in horny as hell. He's going to want to make his impression. He's going to want to show that he can play in this league. And a guy that is up for the Hobey Baker, I promise you, he can play in the NHL. And if we inject him into this lineup somewhere near the playoffs on a 3rd, 4th line role where you're not asking the world of him, he doesn't have the pressure of carrying a team on his shoulders, nowhere even close. He can start to make an impact right away. I just don't think that's something that's out of the realm of possibility by any stretch, and it makes me even more excited for what's going on right now.
I couldn't agree more. And in case you missed that interview, by the way, check down below here on YouTube, and we have it linked up and ready to go for you to check that out. We caught up with Matthew Knies a couple weeks back. It was a lot of fun. And I love that you brought up that name, because you see the recent configurations. And again, you were at the game in Calgary. They tried every imaginable trio possible, including pairings in the back end. And the more I see it, we speculated at the time when they picked up Ryan O'Reilly, I think a perfect fit they would love to see him in is the 3C role, especially in a matchup game when you have home ice against Tampa in the first round. I think that's going to be money in the bank. And that leads me to the conversation about Matthew Knies potentially being a top 6 player, if you can believe it. I know we got to temper our expectations. We did this to a degree with Nick Robertson. You got to be careful with these youngsters. It's a big move. It's a big translation going from the college game to the NHL. But at the very least, there is opportunity for Matthew Knies. If that's a sell point, hey, where's my spot in the lineup? Well, Matthew, there it is. You want to play with John Tavares? You want to play with Mitch Marner? It's there for the taking is what I'm saying. And Rosie, not to get ahead of ourselves, but I am really, really looking forward to seeing A, if he signs with his team, and B, his NHL debut.
Yeah, and I don't know. You never know what a guy's thinking if he's actually set on whether this is his last year in college or not, and whether that's dependent on if he wins the Hobey Baker, whether it's dependent on if he wins a national championship. How happy is he in Minnesota? How happy is he with midterms and semester finals and all the bullshit that comes with being a student athlete? And after talking to him, I just think the kid's an absolute stud. I think that he is not going to need his college education for anything in his future. And I think he is going to be done with college hockey. I hope he has success. I hope he wins the Hobie. I hope he wins the national championship. And then I hope he signs on the dotted line and gets himself into a Maple Leafs uniform where he belongs to be. I think he's an NHL player. And when you talk to players personally, sometimes you can kind of tell, are they hesitant? Are they mature? Do they know the right things? Are they understanding on what's going on around them? And that kid just seems like he is rock solid. He knows what's going on. It seems like he's probably had a good upbringing. He's had a good family life. He's confident. He knows what he's doing. He's never ran into problems with, teammates and working well with others. And just the way he carries himself, I think, goes hand in hand with his physical abilities on the ice. And I think he could be an absolute weapon, obviously going forward, but even right away, again, because you're not going to ask him to carry this team and score the big goal. You're just going to say, hey, do you want to keep playing hockey at a high level? Here's a really, really good hockey team that we want you to play with. Now just go get it done and do your thing and see what happens. And I just think that the sky's the limit for that.
Indisputably a very polarizing topic of conversation in Leafs land, Matthew Knies. Another one of them, and there was some speculation the Maple Leafs could look to address it, was the goaltending. What's your level of confidence? There's this thought out there that Matt Murray is going to get activated in the next couple of days. I'll see it when I believe it when I see it. But nonetheless, Ilya Samsonov's had a great year. Joseph Wall has looked pretty good in a small sample size here. What's your level of confidence with the crease right now?
Mine's high. It's remained high. I've had high confidence. I had high hopes going into the season. I said, hey, here's a former first rounder very recently, a very young, talented prospect of a defenseman that, again, went through his very beginning days in the NHL in the COVID bubble. You know what a goddamn gong show that was for a guy, especially a goalie where you could touch their pad the wrong way or bump into their stick and they're absolutely in a goddamn frenzy. Can you imagine a guy being in the COVID bubble with all of the nonsense that was going on there? So I don't take his early years in the first 2-3 years of his career with very much stock. And I think that we were just giving him for free. And then you back that up with Matt Murray, who's got 2 Stanley Cups, who's capable of playing good, whose numbers are not that bad when he's healthy. And everything that they have shown us in the entirety of this season has been that they are both very good. They are a good 1-2 punch. Their numbers are good. Their goals against is good. Their save percentage is good. They have been winning games. Sammy was absolutely ridiculous at home. And I mean, if we get home ice advantage, maybe you go to him. Mm-hmm. And I think that they're layered quite nicely. And all of a sudden, because the Toronto Maple Leafs, they're playing for nothing but home ice advantage. And Murray's been out for a month and everyone's like, all of a sudden this huge cloud of goaltending issues is over everybody's head. And I don't understand where it came from. They're still winning games. Murray's just taking his time to get healthy, because why wouldn't you take the time now in February and March to get this guy healthy, make sure he's ready for a nice run. And when he's healthy and he's playing, which he's obviously going to be right now, all signs point to that, they're going to be a good tandem again. And they're a better tandem than anything the Leafs have had in the past. How many years do you want to go back? You want to go back to Cujo? So I don't understand why the threat and the worry with the goaltending situation is all of a sudden coming on now. I just really think it's panic because of all the scar tissue in Leafland.
Yeah, it's exactly it. And it's Toronto. And again, to that point, that really hasn't been the story for me when sort of dissecting and writing the obituary for, postseasons past. It really was the offense that dried up. And that's why I think they tried to address the depth. And that's why I think a guy like Matthew Knies could help. Achari, bringing him in, maybe even a Sam Lafferty. Your big boys at the end of the day need to be the big boys, but the goaltending is always going to be a topic of conversation in this market. So fingers crossed Matt Murray is activated and does play a role on the playoff roster. But the good news for the goaltenders is the D, I think, is better, at least from a name personnel in front of them. They pick up Luke Shen. They pick up Jake McCabe. I thought it was a rough first game for Eric Gustafsson. That mistake, I guess, the blunder there on the pass to the blue line leads to the shorthanded goal for Blake Coleman against Calgary. But all in all, I do like the depth of what the back end brings. And, we've talked about it a lot since late October when Jake Muzzin went down. Do you think they did enough to replace Muzzin here in getting set for their playoff round against Tampa?
I think they did all they could. I mean, like I said, they got 9 legit NHL defensemen in their midst. And the only thing they're going to have, I'm not saying an issue with, but where they're going to have to figure out is what is their, 6 solid guys, NHL D-men that they're rolling with. And right now, they're scratching Liljegren and they're putting Hall in. And And I think some people, and myself included, have their qualms with Hall and don't quite understand, if he was an absolute
He's got
defensive
something on them,
specialist,
right?
something's going on, man. It does not make any
Doesn't.
sense. And
Yeah.
I've expressed my qualms with him on his ability to play physical, but just refuses to do so unless his back is against the wall. That just screams
Yeah.
selfishness to me. And I look at Gustafsson and Shen that you've brought in, and I
Yeah.
feel like they can get the job done. And they've got a few games here to figure out who their boys are going to be. And at the end of the day, I think there's no more question marks. It's now, this is the roster. This is what we have. Now let's go forward, see what we can figure out in the next 20 games in the next couple months, and get something rolling, get something gelling, get some chem going, and just roll hot into those playoffs.
Big chem guy. Do you care much for configurations? Like, do players care? Because you watched the game last night. It was 11-7. So they went with 7 defensemen. That's something characteristically we've seen Tampa do a lot of in the past. And the Leafs have really shied away from it. But is that something with 9 defensemen you'd think about doing even in a playoff game, Rosie?
I don't think so. I think it
No?
throws everything off. I mean, you look at you look at O'Reilly starting off like the third line, and then he's playing with Tavares, and he's going all over the place, and you can't even roll a set of lines with the
Yeah.
same configuration because you're down bodies, and then eventually that fourth line gets completely shut out. If it's a close game, it's tough to roll lines, and you got those 2 guys in the fourth line sitting there, and they're getting completely cold. And then all of a sudden 10 minutes roll by, and the coach goes, well, I can't go to them because they've been sitting there cold, and who do I jump in with them? And then you try to, and everything's out of whack and it's out of kilter. I hate it. I don't think the players ever like it. I don't think there's anything positive about the players. You're down a guy on forward, and you're up a guy on defense, and it throws everything off. I think there's a reason they've stayed away from it. And I didn't like it last night. I need consistency, even if it's consistency within the numbers and you mix guys around a little bit. At least the numbers are the same and you can actually roll lines and keep things consistent. Because when you start to go off with the odd man numbers, guys just inevitably get left out. And in the playoffs, you need to be able to roll those lines. You need that third and fourth line to be able to jump in and fill those roles so that you get into overtime or whatever the case is. You need to double shift guys. They need to be able to take those minutes. And if you're putting the minutes to them in the first and second period, man, it's just going to be one shift that you're gassed and your game's over and you're down 3-2 and now your back's up against the wall. That's the last thing they can afford.
And so 20 games left, as mentioned, in the regular season. What do you want to see from this team as we get set for game 1 against the Tampa Bay Lightning, as we know?
Yeah, I want to see. I mean, I know it's chemistry. I wish I had a different word for it, but I want to see them just start rolling. I want to see them clicking. I want to see them, working off each other and having that momentum where every shift and every whistle and every TV timeout, the coach is screaming over to get the other team over and going, this is what we have to do. And they're pulling the whiteboard out and he's yelling in the intermission. He's pulling out the iPad and he's saying, this is where we're lacking. And all the Leafs are doing is just getting some fucking water and Gatorade in them and patting each other on the back, keep going, and they're just rolling and rolling and rolling. And when you run into teams like that, they just feel like a buzzsaw, and it's just all you can do to hold on, let alone beat them. And if they can find that chem where they're just momentum rolling machine, that's what you're always looking for going into the playoffs, because it's hard to stop a team that's just rolling one after another. It feels like everything just fits together, and that's what every team's looking for this time of year.
Yeah, that's very well said. Some words I would use: chemistry, stability, consistency, health, I think is of vast importance. So it's one thing to have this roster. Let's get to game 1 with this roster. Obviously, it's the NHL. It's a tough game. There's going to be injuries along the way, but I think managing that is going to be important. We're seeing that right now with the Boston Bruins and load management. I'm not saying sit Matthews for 15 games, but you have some depth, utilize it, especially on the back end. If a guy's not feeling great, don't be afraid to mix and match with your lineup. But without question, it's been a phenomenal ride thus far, Rosie, with 20 games remaining. The deadline's passed. Your first deadline. How was it as a media member?
Yeah, it was interesting. Things are going all over the place. I had the feeling that a lot of the big names have been moved already early on. So you're kind of dissecting and going through things with a fine tooth comb, trying to figure out who's moving what. But it's always funny to try to listen to the insiders, get some inside information, who's doing what, and try to figure out what's actually going on in those war rooms up in the top of those buildings with every NHL GM and president, and everyone's involved. It's a fun time of year, and lots of moves were made. There was some surprising ones. I mean, Sandin's not on our roster anymore. Yeah. I don't think anyone had that pegged, but lots of fun stuff. It's neat to be on this side of things, and I'm actually just excited to get going with the actual part of the season that matters.
At the Leafs Nation 401, at the Leafs Nation 401, where you could subscribe to our very own spanking new YouTube page. We're live on the Nation Network, 11 to 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday to Friday. Again, that's Jay Rosehill. I'm Nick Alberga. Appreciate you hopping along, and let's get set. Game one of the Stanley Cup playoffs, just 20 regular season games away.